Hello, fellow Rebel Capitalists. Hope you're well. I'm here with my good buddy, Jeff Booth, and he texted me the other day, and he said, George, we got to talk about Bitcoin. It's not just the normal stuff that you hear on FinTwit. He says there's a problem here, and there's a problem within the Bitcoin community, the way they're actually looking at the world. And I said, absolutely, Jeff, because you're one of my favorite people to talk to. So I wanted to have him on the show so he could explain exactly these important topics that I assure you not only pertain to Bitcoin, but more importantly, pertain to your freedom, liberty, and free market capitalism. So on that note, my friend, you've got the mic.
Yeah, so I specifically wanted to do this with you, George, because I think you and I had a couple of debates on what the existing world was looking like and what Bitcoin was looking like, and I think it was such a respectful kind of. I totally saw your point. You saw mine, and at the end of that, and you correct me if I'm if I have this wrong, but we both got to the spot that you could see both people's perspectives, and if given a certain if Bitcoin stayed decentralized and secure and people used it as a currency, then that world would happen. And I saw your perspective that most people wouldn't, and they would give their control to the existing system and it would consolidate Bitcoin. So I think in the nuance of that is where we could both see each other's point of view on what was happening. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, that was a while ago, but if I remember correct, Jeff, our main disagreement was kind of in the timing as far as if we go into a Bitcoin world, is it going to be lent in a fractional reserve type way?
And to me, that's connected to it.
Yeah, my position was yes, it probably will be just based on what we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
And your view was it would at the beginning, but likely over time, we would revert back to a more full reserve system.
Yeah.
And that's our biggest point of contention as far as I remember.
Yeah. So that's actually perfect, because I think the nuance of this conversation is so important on what's because anytime there's change in the world, especially drastic like this, the change comes from people seeing that and kind of the free market deciding or which one is right.
Yep.
And then move and transitioning across society. So it's bound to have people on all different sides of that issue and not understanding the issue as deep as maybe you or myself do, and what that looks like. And then their actions on top of that would reinforce the system they believe in. So let's just set the table on a couple of different things we know for sure is true. And actually, I'm going to help make your argument here too. We know for sure that the natural state of a free market is deflation.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And why is that? Because anything scarce creates more value for entrepreneurs to attack, and we attack it, and we use the things that produce more value. And we trade with people all over the world. So the natural state of that has to be deflation as prices fall to the marginal cost of production. So if you nod your head at that and say yes, then that means as a consequence of that, we've never truly lived in a global free market system. It's always been some sort of control system that aggregates control through either centralizing gold and changing the rules on gold, but it has to be true that every system we've ever known wasn't a free market, completely free market system. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we were a lot closer to it at the late 1800s and in the free banking system. But to your point, it wasn't completely and totally a free market, absent all 100% government control and regulation.
Yeah, and then and so if that's true, then what happens within that is, and I think this is what happened in the free market banking market, because our actions try to get, let's say, more yield in free banking, then there's an incentive, a natural incentive, to actually have less reserve in your currency in the bank right? Because you can give more if you can trade at more. And then those banks that can give a higher rate of return fractionalize more, and you use them more because they give you a higher rate of return. And then when the banking crisis comes, the same thing that hurt the problem because of our incentives trying to make more money in that system, create regulatory environment that says we're going to control it, and it aggregates up, right?
Yeah,
And
it shouldn't. It's just the people that took too much risk should go bust, and those assets should be acquired by those who were more prudent. Yeah. But in the real world, especially in today's day and age, yeah, they're going to get bailed out, and that's going to create the perverse incentive moving forward.
And so it constantly happens. But then what you have to realize is we are part of that system. We are part of the people that take the perverse incentive because we think, and then we want to get bailed out, and we vote for people to bail us out. And so, we can't.
Society, not
right.
George Yemen.
So, and then we complain about the outcome of that of those bad people, when it was really us and our fear and our greed and fear that drive the regulation. In other words, in a free market economy, there actually can't be a monopoly. And the monopoly is created out of the fear that scares people to be able to put regulatory capture that then ends up centralizing. So that's the world we've always lived in. And some markets were more free than other markets. Magna Carta would have been an example. And then the US under the Constitution was a really great example of the republic that created liberty and freedom, that then was a way more productive economy because people left non-productive economies to move to the US.
Yeah.
It created the US empire, and then that got captured. And we ended up using essentially a monetary equivalent of modern day slavery. Instead of invading another country for their gold and having a big army to steal their resources, you could steal their resources through a monetary instrument without ever having to invade them.
Do you want to expand on that just a little bit, Jeff?
Yeah. So just because inflation, if you control the reserve and you can print more dollars, that means you could buy Russia's oil and fund your expansion of your military industrial complex. Well, they have to produce the oil. You produce a piece of paper that reprices their oil.
Yeah, right? In theory, I agree with you. In practice, especially prior to the GFC, I don't know if that's how it panned out, because as we've discussed many times, the Fed's balance sheet pretty much didn't move from the late 1950s to 2007. Yep. So they weren't doing that, although to your point, they obviously had the ability to.
Yeah. And I think what ends up happening, and this is why this is so nuanced, is kind of the repricing of gold was one breaking the rules of the contract, right? Because the debt couldn't be repaid. So I'm going to repay it a different way. And then you essentially reset the debt all over the world through that instrument to the petrodollar system. And then as you get later in the game, you have to do it. So after the GFC, then you're really doing it, and it gets worse and worse. And that, so if that's the case, then, so that is the,
and just to be clear there, the reason I point that out, Jeff, is just because a lot of people, especially the younger people, they've just grown up in a QE world.
Totally. Yeah. They don't know.
Right. So they assume that they see that chart of the dollar since 1913. You know the one I'm talking to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
totally. Losing all of its value. And they assume that the Fed's balance sheet was just increasing at the exact same time. Therefore, the Fed's balance sheet equals a devaluation of the dollar. And it's not necessarily true, because if you believe that, then you believe that the Fed is the only reason why we would have consumer price inflation.
Yep.
I like to point out that it's not just the Fed. There's other things that are going on, because we had some extreme consumer price inflation when the Fed quite literally wasn't doing anything. So we've got to focus on those things as well. And that's where I always go back to the government spending as a percentage of GDP, creating economic distortions that if you are increasing the money supply through the banking system, is going to lead to consumer price inflation.
Yeah, and that's kind of, that has to be a lever, because and you and I are just, I think we would argue on the cause of it versus which is correlated, which is caused. And my belief is it's caused by picking the pocket of a whole bunch of people through through a system that has to make government bigger. So when a wipeout happens, government leans in, right,
Yeah, right.
to protect people.
Yeah.
To protect people, and Reagan, and create bigger government institutions to protect them, and actually consolidates more power. So and government gets big.
If you look at a chart, Jeff, of government spending as a percent of GDP,
Yeah.
you see that prior to like 1913, we're at like 5%. And
Totally.
then it just goes, and every single time we have a quote unquote crisis, whether it's World War I, World War II, anything like that, it spikes and it comes back down slightly, but then it levels out to a point that's much higher than
Yep.
where it started. So you just have this gradual progression of going from 5% all the way up to where we are today, where I would argue, if you include state and local, we're at over 50%
Exactly.
of GDP as a result of government spending.
And so if you just actually now go right back to the first principles, if the natural state of the free market is deflation, which we know for sure, not zero inflation, deflation,
Yep.
right? Because then that means that any inflation rate, even zero, is picking pocket of you, and the consequence has to be centralization. It has to do that. Like this, so the consequence,
centralization comes first.
And exactly. And then
the picking of the pocket, just to be clear, isn't necessarily due to an expansion of the Fed's balance sheet.
Exactly.
That's what I want to make sure we're clear, because a lot of people in the sound money space, not just Bitcoin, but the gold space as well, they get hyper focused on the Fed's balance sheet and assume that is the be all cause to the devaluation of the dollar, even prior to 2008. And I think that's a misrepresentation of the facts, and therefore you're taking your eye off the ball.
Yeah. And so, and I think you do a really good job of the detail in there. I'm just wanted to come back to the first principle. We know for sure the natural state of the free market is deflation.
Yeah.
What that means, if you know that for sure, is every year in that, if you measured in at something that couldn't be centralized, then today's rate of deflation would accrue to you even if you didn't work. Right. So you would get richer every year, even if you didn't work. And the next year, because there'd be more innovation, there would be less misallocated capital, more innovation, you'd get richer still. You'd get richer by the rate of deflation, even if you did nothing.
Yeah, but we couldn't have society do that, or then we would not be getting richer, because we would not be creating more goods and services that leads to the consumer price deflation.
No, I guess what I'm getting at is I think that that's the natural state, because today, if you just, let's use an example, and I've talked about this example many times, but the prices fall to the marginal cost of production. So let's use artificial intelligence. We know how that's a massive productivity tool. And we also know that it's hard to make a lot of money there, because what's the price of a line of code created by other lines of code? It's the energy cost of the line of code. And then after the model's trained, it gets moved out to the edge. And I have all these models on my computer and they cost nothing. So it's completely free, and I gain the abundance. And that's the staggering productivity tool that spread. In other words, there's no way to create a monopoly of artificial intelligence unless you can create fear in the public to regulate artificial intelligence, so you can create a monopoly to control people. Right. So prices keep falling forever, and that's just a natural state of the market, because anywhere where I can make more money, anything that's stuck, entrepreneurs swarm to try to create more value. And the outcome of that is that competition keeps on falling to the marginal cost of production. So through that world, you can see that through that world, and you can see all of the regulatory environment and all of the big tech trying to make you fearful of artificial intelligence, because that's the only way that they can protect a monopoly in that environment. So all of these things make perfect sense, but it also shows why most people will fearing for their job
Mm.
against the artificial intelligence will give more power to the same people stealing it,
Right.
right? And and that will create a bigger regulatory burden, and that'll create more misallocated capital, and that could create. So if you're measuring from that system, and by the way, I do want to tie this into Bitcoin and this because all of this stuff is a derivative of fighting the natural state of a market, which is deflation.
Yeah.
Right. So and we trade with people all over the world, right? That's what we did. That's what we do. And no matter what you do, like if you try to route tariffs to be able to do it, you'll make your own economy uncompetitive. Well, this still goes on around the world, right? So we know that this is true, and these things don't work for any length of time, but people believe they work, and they give them more power, and they centralize everything out of their actions, and then we go to war to reset that world. And once we reset, we say we promise not to do it again, and it all starts again.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of human history through that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you have to get to rock bottom, like Argentina, before you get the people willing to vote for a Malay.
Yeah.
And I also point out before you go on, Jeff, that when you state the natural the natural trend in the economy with a free market system is deflation, I want to point out that is not only true with sound money or if with a fixed money supply, that's also true with an expansion of the money supply as long as the banks are doing it to lend productively. So I always point out that M2 money supply increased at the same rate pretty much in the late 1800s as it did from 2008 to 2020. But back then we had deflation. Even with fractional reserve lending, we still had consumer price deflation, not disinflation.
Yeah.
And this goes back to, I think, emphasize your point.
Yeah, and so you had an economy that was the backbone of the U.S. empire that was created through that deflationary environment because everybody was getting richer. Because the only thing we've ever found to be able to be able to trade with people that we don't like and benefit both of us is the free market.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's a benefit to society through that trade. Otherwise, everything other than that is putting other people in control of everything you need to do with your life. That's what it is. And at the end of those two spectrums, right, these two systems are incongruent together. You either have one, you have the system we've always lived in, right, that is actually, now we realize, is actually a control system that has to gain its control by actually having negative externalities to somebody else that we're aggregating on through kind of a military industrial complex or a monetary system that has to do that. And then as it gets later and later in stages, right, with all of us contributing to it, the world breaks. We go through a chaotic and a reset. And this time, if the world breaks, we're in a very different technological spot than we were the last time of the break. In other words, that nuclear war type of scenario could break us all, right? And so, but that's what it always looks like, and it looks like that because these things can't coexist. You either have a control system that has to gain greater control and somebody has to lose, and it gets worse and worse and worse, or you have a free market system where everybody benefits. And that's and we've never in history had something that could be a truly global free market system on Bitcoin. And so I want a couple things first. So that I always say that assumes Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, right? And my assumption, everything, if we've never seen something that could stay decentralized and secure, it always got centralized. Gold got centralized. Everything else got centralized.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this now. And this is why I named the video "Here's the Problem with Bitcoin" with Jeff Booth, because I knew you were gonna go this direction based on it. Yeah.
But then let's take the next step, and this is where I wanted to actually, and some of because I've been noodling on some of the stuff that you've been saying, and I couldn't quite. I know my perspective. I know the things I'm investing in to make sure that this happens. It stays decentralized and secure. But I couldn't quite on this point. I couldn't quite. I don't think I did a good job on the last podcast with you on my view on why that stays, why that's the case, and understanding your view on why everything always gets co-opted, right? And so, and Saylor just had this debate with Safe, and I don't think Safe did a very good job in explaining it either. And Saylor, and so you can see all of the different participants in this are actually. I'm going to say one simple thing: if Bitcoin wasn't used as a medium of exchange, it will be centralized, and it will be centralized.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting to me because from my view, Bitcoin's already won.
So
because I always, when my experience down in Argentina, there was no liquidity for Bitcoin whatsoever. Same thing with gold, but to me, in a way that really didn't matter, even if it wasn't being used as a medium of exchange, because it allowed me to transfer almost limitless purchasing power cross borders. And if I would have had time to set up a community that would have been willing to accept Bitcoin, or even Tether for that matter, then I could just take my Bitcoin, turn it into Tether, give them the Tether, then they give me the currency. If it's not used as a medium of exchange, then I can go ahead and buy the goods and services that I want. And the fact that Bitcoin allows me to do that outside of the system, to me, it's one.
So I'm
interested.
Yeah, this is
because it hasn't actually won yet.
Yes, and that's kind of what why I wanted. That's why I sent you the note, because on layer one, it's one. And what most people are doing, here's how I look at it. Instead of saying Bitcoin, say this: a decentralized and secure protocol, an open, decentralized, secure protocol that anybody can use, permissionless, that's bounded by energy. And imagine what that thing bounded by energy would look at versus a piece of paper pricing that thing. And so the thing bounded by energy that's decentralized and secure would be repricing the world, the free market that I'm speaking of. It would be repricing everything versus that protocol, right? My house would be falling in value. Energy prices would be falling in value, everything. But what most people are doing is they're taking Bitcoin, the thing that is operating perfectly in the free market, they're converting it to a fiat piece of paper and believing Bitcoin's going up to price things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're right. So they're actually making. So you wouldn't if you lived in Argentina, you wouldn't, or if you lived in the U.S., you wouldn't take your U.S. dollar to Argentina to then price things. You don't take a currency to another currency to price things. You use a currency to price things. And so what people are doing, thinking Bitcoin's going up, is they're actually giving more strength to the system that's stealing from them.
It's like the Fed. It's like,
and forget the Fed in this. So just imagine a system that cannot let the free market system work. It has to drive inflation. Otherwise, the entire thing fails. So it cannot let the free market work. And you are in that system, and you would never vote to let a deflationary spiral happen. You would never vote to have your house fall in value completely and every bank fail. So you are part of the system that emboldens the politicians to steal from you, because you believe in the piece of paper and the entire construct of that. And then you're taking that construct that is exactly opposite from the free market, and you're using that construct to be able to trade in Bitcoin. So what that would do, and this is, we can get into some of the things why I know that I'm very positive Bitcoin will be used as a medium of exchange and everything else as well. And this is why we created the venture fund, to be able to build kind of all this other technology that would allow it to be a medium of exchange. But what that would do naturally is you would be making, so if you knew, let's back up. If you knew everything I knew about Bitcoin at layer one, and you couldn't stop it, there was no way. And you just reinforced that it's borderless. Nobody can stop it. It just gets stronger, more decentralized, more secure. And you knew if it became a medium of exchange, all of the control structure, all of the institutions that steal from you at a crazy rate to get stronger, all of the people in there would be hurt by the free market because they wouldn't actually be, but all of this control structure would go away. And that control structure was the entire global rules order. What would you do? And what you would do is you would try to consolidate Bitcoin at layer two. You would use it as a currency. You would say, let's use this as a base layer of our new currency. And you would get everybody to use the derivative instrument of Bitcoin instead of a medium of exchange in the US dollar to be able to consolidate layer two. And all you would have done is gone from gold to petrodollar to Bitcoin, and nothing would have changed.
Yeah. So the way I would say that, Jeff, is when I see a lot of people on FinTwit talking about the new advances in Bitcoin, sometimes I look at that and I say, do these people not realize that this advancement is just taking it closer to the system we already have?
So
that's
like
you're creating as not, this isn't a literal example, but let's say they come out and said, oh, look at this. This is fantastic. Now we don't need the dollar anymore because we can do interest rate swaps with paper Bitcoin. Isn't this amazing? Like, whoa, time out here. All we're doing is headed toward the exact same system we already have. And you're claiming that it's some sort of miracle or something we should celebrate, right?
That's exactly what I'm getting at. And what that means is same reason you wouldn't let your house go down and same reason you're pricing Bitcoin thinking it's going up. It is not. It's repricing the world if it stays decentralized and secure. And there's a massive potential attack caused by everyone's actions within the system trying to make it go up in US dollars. And they are all part of a centralizing force that would, so if you think of it going up in US dollars, you are part of this that gives this actually, or that risks Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the chicken or the egg there, though, Jeff, is that at the end of the day, people don't want Bitcoin. They don't want gold. They want stuff. They want goods and services. So if the stuff is denominated in dollars, they don't have a choice but to look at things through that lens.
Yeah, or say it said differently. We're so used to prices going up, and we're so used to stuff being priced in our functional currency that we know is a centralizing force that is also being debased. We know this, but we're still so used to pricing it in it. Same as if you're in Argentina, most people are still pricing it in their piece of paper. They know it, and they still price it in that.
Yeah, but I think to give them credit, I think it's really the volatility risk that they have doing business by pricing things in Bitcoin and then accepting Bitcoin, knowing that your input costs are priced in dollars, and you're taking a massive, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Yeah. That's a huge risk. So what's weird, or I guess what's difficult, the challenge is how do we first and foremost create a, I guess, circular, maybe, or an enclosed system. That would probably be better, where all goods and services are being created, priced, and sold in Bitcoin, and expand that to a level to where the dollar economies, let's say, want to do business with you, and therefore they're going to hold more and more Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin takes over, just like the dollar took over from the British pound.
Yeah. So that's, and what we're seeing in the fund and what we're seeing in the companies that we're funding is exactly that happening. And so what we've created in this, and this is why I'm probably closer to this, is you're creating the Bitcoin at layer one couldn't scale to 8 billion people.
Right.
So the trade-offs to keep it decentralized and secure meant it was ineffective as a currency. And you had a whole bunch of people early on that wanted to make bigger block sizes, kind of Bitcoin Cash and other things, to be able to solve that trade-off. And then there was a massive fight in 2017, and there's a chain split because some people realized it's critical. The decentralization and security is the critical thing, because if it gets centralized, governments will stop it, right? The person who controls the nodes stops it. But the nuance of the people thinking it had to be used as a currency is actually also right. It was just the way that it would be used as a currency in layer 2 in Lightning and Liquid, rather than layer 1, which would sacrifice the trade-off.
So you're saying that your companies are working on a layer 2 solution that would have the best of both worlds.
Exactly. So Lightning and Liquid already have those, and so we're invested in companies that are actually growing really fast with those open source technologies and different implementations of those technologies. We invested in a company called Fedi, which is on Fedimint, and there's another example of, for a lot of your listeners, they should really look at this, because you have to, the hypocrisy of people's actions within a centralized system, and your own and other people. So if you say, there's a whole bunch of people that say Elon Musk, free speech, he's saving free speech. Well, you can't save free speech from a centralized server, a centralized system. He's on one say is free speech, and the other he says, I'm going to listen to the laws of the land. I'm going to let China do what they want. They can say they can turn people off. And those things are,
and Brazil's got me by the short hairs.
Yeah, but each of those things are so it sounds like a really good fight, but you know the power of the centralization. But if Harris gets elected, what do you think is going to happen to Elon Musk's information, right? And so there is no solving the problem from a centralized system. It's impossible. That's actually the brilliance of Bitcoin. It had to be decentralized and secure. So one of the why people really like Fedi or Fedimint, what we built, or what we helped fund Obi and team to be able to do, is they took Chaomini Cash, which was probably a 20-year-old technology, but almost a cryptographer's dream, super private, super secure. And they embedded that on top of Bitcoin multisig. So what that means is you and I, let's say my family could have guardians. We could be who could set the rules for that federation, and the rules peg in Bitcoin through Lightning into that, and offer unlimited transaction speed with no fees inside that, but also gain complete anonymity. So no, the guardians can't see any of the messages or the transactions. Fedi as a company can't see any of the transactions or the messages. It's complete privacy. And because it's complete privacy in that type of scenario, how it gains, it creates almost the free banking era of I can have my own family federation. I can invite friends into it. And as long as they trust that I'm not going to conspire with 2 people to take their money, right, or three people, then it's safe. But you could set this up in a way that you don't know the 5 people, so you couldn't conspire with them in a way. And every transaction on top of that, which is on top of Bitcoin, because it's built on top of this layer, you have Bitcoin rails in complete circular economy and privacy of communication that's unattackable. That is spreading so fast right now because it's all built the same way. Nodes of people of trusted networks that are all interoperable. So what would you ask? What's the risk of a system like that? Risk of a system like that is similar to the free banking movement. One of those networks could say fractionalize your Bitcoin, and offer something different. So what would you do? You wouldn't hold a lot of money unless you really trusted the one that you're in or your own, but you would be in 20 of them, and you would you'd move into the bigger ones just when you wanted to spend with them, right? And it would be all interoperable together. So I guess what I'm getting at is, here's another kind of thing we know for sure in technology or in free markets. Every scarcity creates an opportunity. And what's happening today is the centralization of the powers is ripping apart the world, is creating opportunities to create value for people that are getting hurt by this. And so it's actually speeding up the decentralized world, and it's speeding up in a protocol design that's actually bringing this future that looks very different than this control structure we've always lived in, where it is a medium of exchange. It turns into exactly what you're talking about. And it's caused by the very same thing, that scarcity of people understanding this and moving their time to create value.
Yeah, what I hear you talking about, which is exciting and fascinating, is creating the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So people can actually use this in a way that provides maximum efficiency, privacy, etc. But where I struggle, Jeff, is how do we solve the network effect problem?
So
Because
that's
like you had MySpace, right? And you can make Facebook, but okay, it's the same thing, it's the same type of platform, but how do you make it to where the network effect of Facebook, let's say, can take over the network effect that MySpace had already established? And understanding, and you and I think both agree on this, that the network effect of the United States dollar is probably the greatest network effect, most powerful, strongest network that we have ever seen in human history. So how you see where I'm like, it's a chicken.
I totally see where you're. In fact, this is actually why I wanted to credit you, because so we invested in Fedi a long time ago because we knew this would happen. We knew that the layer 2 would have to be the US dollar, and that would destroy Bitcoin eventually. It would, if it fails as a medium of exchange, it fails as a store of value, just like gold, right? That's, you could simplify what I just said. And what would you do? You would.
You're saying,
yeah, I'm saying if Bitcoin failed as a medium of exchange, it will fail as a store of value eventually.
Okay, I got it.
Right, and it has to, because and most people that are pricing it going up in US dollars are actually contributing to the centralization.
Right.
Because it'll be fractionalized, it'll be derivative instruments, it'll be everything else, and they'll be cheering the whole way because they're measuring it going up in US dollar, the same US dollar that actually has to centralize and take power from them, because it's exactly the opposite of the free market.
Okay, so tell me how we solve the problem. If I'm a business owner, and I love your pitch, right?
Yeah.
But I'm saying, Jeff, to make my widget, I've got, let's just say 50 inputs, and every one of my vendors where I get these inputs to make my widget is billing in the United States dollar. Therefore, I have to price my output in dollars regardless of how much I like Bitcoin. And then what I want to do is take my profits, and then I want to go ahead and buy Bitcoin, because I agree with what you're saying. That's the store of value. But how do you get that guy who has 35 inputs all priced in dollars to all of a sudden say, well, you know what, screw it, I'm going to go ahead and start pricing my stuff in Bitcoin and take that risk? Like, how do we get from A to B?
Yeah. So slowly, at first, and then fast. And in some countries, it happens faster because their currencies are worse than our currencies. But I was just at breakfast today, and somebody said, well, I would love to charge in Bitcoin, but will anybody pay? And then the next breath, they talked about all the Bitcoiners that they would, right? And so it's that whole thing is if you essentially, if you know for sure, like if it stayed decentralized and secure, you know, if you can handle the volatility, it's worth way more.
And again, I just to be clear, I don't think the problem is getting people to pay in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think the problem is getting the subcontractors and the vendors to accept Bitcoin. When
Yeah,
all
but
of their vendors, you know, you got the 35 people, then let's say you got 35 vendors. Let's say each one of those vendors has 35 vendors.
yeah, let's start it at small. What happens kind of at a smaller basis, where I spoke and what we created at a conference in Madeira, and spoke there. Saylor came, Jack Dorsey came, a whole bunch, and we did that as to try to copy what was happening at Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador. That then moved into El Salvador. We said, what if we could create a small enough community, 150,000 people, that is insulated? What president of Madeira said,
and it would have to be self-sufficient. They'd have to grow all their own
so
food.
it's supportive, but it has to start somewhere, right? And it has to start with, like you said, what ends up happening in network effects, even if you just said in Bitcoin, if there's only one vendor in Vancouver that's going to take Bitcoin, and I have to get on a bus or drive an hour to be able to get to use that vendor, I won't keep going to the vendor, right? And then because I don't keep going, there's not enough people using it, then they turn it off, and it starts. So network effects happen locally or where you're trading a lot. So what we did is we said, let's go into this, let's use this conference as a spot to do it. And by the time we launched the conference, I think there were 8 vendors, maybe 10 vendors that were taking Bitcoin on the island. Now and that was in February. Now there's 120. And it's exploding. By the way, and if you zoom up a level, if you just said it in Lightning, what's happening in Lightning transactions on Bitcoin, it's actually growing faster than the internet. But it's hard to see from each person's domain where they live. But some of these communities, it's really growing quickly, and then now those are merging together. And different things are being so it is growing in the network effect. So the network effect has to be there. But we invested in a company last year that does derivatives on Bitcoin. So, but with no counterparty risk because it's on Lightning. That company was doing about $40 million a month when we invested in it, and it's already done about $4.5 billion this year. So in 1 year, they've grown that much on this. And so those are all Lightning transactions that fiat transactions are blind to, and nobody knows how fast this is growing in a whole bunch of these different companies providing value to other people, and then connecting more and more companies. And that's just, I think I said this on the last podcast. Monopolies are the last to see innovation that changes the monopoly. Who's the first? The furthest away from the monopoly, most hurt from the monopoly. So under that, it would make perfect sense that El Salvador would go first. It would make perfect sense that some of these other communities that understand this and are connected would go first. And some of them are really small, different communities that are entirely, there's Bitcoin jungle in Costa Rica. I don't know if you've been there, but it's an entire circular economy that you can't use cash. It's just Bitcoin. And all of the vendors, like all of them take Bitcoin. It's really turned into, and it started just a couple vendors, and then as they started to understand, just like I took a learning path to get here, you're taking a learning path to get there, and you get to this point, and you say, which system do I want to contribute my time to? Do I want to contribute my time and my energy to the one that's centralizing us? Right? Because everything within it has to centralize. Or do I want to contribute to the other one? And so I think that's what's happening, but we're just early in that process.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been to El Salvador. I was supposed to go the other day, and I just didn't have time. I'll definitely get there in the future. Based on my experience in Argentina, I've not seen this exponential growth
Yeah.
say, in a place where you would expect to see Bitcoin absolutely flourishing, not just as a store of value, but as a medium of exchange, it was completely and totally illiquid.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say that as, oh, Jeff, you're wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that this, and I want to allocate time and energy. I mean, that's what this channel is all about, to decentralization, to liberty, freedom, and to fight this centralization. But I'm there again. I'm trying to look at this through the lens of realism and saying why in a country where your currency is losing 20% per month, why the hell can I not sell Bitcoin for that depreciating currency? Like what? It's same thing with gold. I don't want to knock on Bitcoin, but and I think we have to ask that question, because if we don't ask that question, if we just try to ignore it and sweep it under the rug, then we're never going to find a solution.
No, this is actually why I totally respect what you're saying, and I did in our debate last time. I use this.
What's the disconnect in Argentina, Jeff, in your view?
So everybody thinks it's somebody else's job, right? So that what ends up happening is, and you rely on other people to make decisions over and over and over. Somebody else has got this. You live within the currency regime that they determine that is stealing your time, and you are giving, as you're getting your energy sucked from you as you give it more energy. Look at the political system in the US today. Both sides of that equation are the exact same argument. Who gets to and look on Twitter or anything else. It's just complete nonsense. But both people are so sure that they're right, and they're giving more strength to a system that's stealing from them. Both sides, and they are convinced that the other side is wrong. So it's warping all of our time, and it does the same thing in Argentina. It does the same thing in Nazi Germany, and people get so sure that it's those other people when it's actually the system, and it happens everywhere. And so our own system. By the way, I think I said this to you before, but when I realized, this is before I started Ego Death, I realized I'm speaking on Bitcoin all over the world. I'm talking to politicians. I'm talking to the biggest money cap providers and everything else. And 90% of my energy is invested in fiat companies. And I'm on boards of fiat companies and everything else. I woke up one night with almost like a panic, and I'm the biggest hypocrite around, because I know what's happening. I know this is centralizing, and what I'm actually doing by contributing to it is actually making it worse for me. I might win more than the next guy, but everybody's losing in that system, and that's actually why we created Ego Death Capital. Or one of the reasons we created it, because I needed to move my time intentionally from the system that was centralizing to the system that was decentralized, to the free market system. And I wouldn't have seen, by the way, but I had to do that for me, no matter what the cost, because I couldn't. It was such a hypocrite in it, right? I was talking about this while spending all my time in the system that was centralizing, and I knew it. So, but by doing it, what I got to see and what I get to see is, and when you see kind of all of the different things that people are building that give you hope for we do have a path. You just want to do more. We have a really good path, and it's getting more and more exciting. You want to do more. But I also understand from the same thing, because I had to go through it myself. I understand everybody else is just going through that same thing in time. And a lot of people, even Bitcoiners that are measuring Bitcoin go up in US dollars, are actually giving their strength to the system that they're yelling at all the time.
Yeah, I agree with that. But taking it back to Argentina, I don't think they're using the peso or the dollar as a medium of exchange instead of Bitcoin, because they haven't had this epiphany moment that you obviously have had. I think doing
yeah.
so because it's just a matter of efficiency. And they look around them and they say, what's the most efficient way that I can transact and do business? And if Bitcoin provided a way that was more efficient, then they would go ahead and do so. But what's interesting there, and I think this is what I want to share with you, because I know you and Lynn are working on these solutions. I tried to put a lot of thought into why on earth I could not sell that Bitcoin or gold or silver, or I had difficulty for and it's not that stuff was not priced in Bitcoin, or I couldn't pay for stuff in Bitcoin. I literally couldn't trade Bitcoin for their depreciating currency. I want to be clear. So I thought, why is this? Why is this? And the conclusion I came to is that they don't have a functioning banking system. And if you don't have a functioning banking system, the only thing with liquidity that allows you to get the goods and services you need is cash.
Yeah.
Just cash outside of the system. Because you say, George, well, you could take this Bitcoin. Well, great. If I want to take that Bitcoin and then buy stuff, now all of a sudden I've got to put it within this, I've got to cash it out. That goes in my bank. And in my bank in Colombia, or excuse me, in Argentina, it's not functioning to a point where I can only pull out $40 a day. And it's stuck in this bank where it's depreciating by, let's say, 20% per month. So what do I do with it? And it's the exact same thing. So you get to the point where nothing's liquid. Houses aren't liquid. Cars aren't liquid. No one wants to sell anything unless they're selling it for just cold, hard currency. So I guess my point there is in a world where we're thinking about solutions, we also have to give these people the equivalent of a banking system in order to store and transact efficiently. And maybe that's layer 2, what you guys are working on. And then we have to present it in a way that shows these people that this is a more efficient and where the risk reward makes a lot more sense. And it's got to be something that isn't just philosophical. It's got to be something that's practical in the real world.
Yeah, and not just so if you think about how hard it is to understand Bitcoin as layer 1, number 1, right? Just because it's challenging a mental model that's always existed, and people it's a hard thing to get to. So people have to and then to understand it as a currency, and not just understand it, but it's fair to say that Lightning and Liquid and the kind of the layer 2 is just entering a time where the transactions don't fail. They work all the time, but it's not good enough to have 80% transaction working or a wallet in a currency. It has to work all the time. So this kind of all of the different people working on that, tightening out different business ideas, all these things to be able to create a more robust network or superhighway that then it becomes simpler to use, right? But imagine using your transaction or you're being one of the first vendors, and then it only works some of the time, and you're not going to use it.
I don't even need to imagine it, Jeff. I lived it. it. I did another little experiment where I went to St. Martin. I was in St. Bart's, and they're all, I heard, oh, well, that's Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Cash. And you look at this little app, map where all these vendors are taking Bitcoin Cash. So I'm like, okay, I'll take a ferry over there for a day and try to survive on Bitcoin Cash, just like I did in Argentina.
Yeah.
And there was the app is total bullshit. Like there were no vendors anywhere. I found one on the island that actually was on the map, and he did accept Bitcoin Cash. I tried to buy a coffee from the guy. This was at the end of the trip, and the transaction didn't go through. And then we had to sit there and wait for a half hour to try to get it to go through. And then I ended up just paying cash, real cash. And then when I got on the plane, I saw the transaction just went through.
Yeah. So anyways, we then know exactly why, because you want to do the easiest thing, and it has to be simplified. And just think about the internet in the beginning of the internet, and you're wanting to download, and it took forever, and you're waiting, and why didn't people use the internet? Why didn't people see all the value that was coming? Because it didn't feel like it was going to come at the speed that they were used to, what they were doing before. And then all of a sudden it changes because all the rails get better, and it just becomes way easier. We're in that process of doing that, but it builds a really powerful world, because what it really means is there isn't a control structure against you. It's 8 billion people in service of 8 billion people, and the free market wins. You don't have to store your money in a house because you're worried about the bank stealing your money. You don't have to have the regulatory environment from a system stealing from you to save you from other people, right? They like, when you think about it, you have a system designed on theft that is trying to protect your money, and that's what they call a bank, right? No wonder they'll lock the doors and will only let you take out so much of it at a time. No wonder it'll look like. Of course, it'll look like that. You have a system of centralization, and in this new system, you have 8 billion people in service of 8 billion people, and that means faster deflation. That means faster wealth for every person on this planet. Now, for the people that are early and understand this, and they're building this, they're going to do extraordinarily well by building to the free market. And the people that are pricing that free market or if they're in a currency, they're just going to get destroyed from the free market, just like every country that that is more free is more productive. But you don't have to wait for your country to go. Bitcoin is a country, and you can tune out all of the noise that you make stronger through your actions within that system, and spend more time in the system that is emerging as that free market.
As you're talking, the thought that's going through my head as far as a bottom line is, if we want decentralization to win, and we're using the Bitcoin, we'll call it network, for what we need to strive towards as a society to get this deflation. Understanding our opponent is Goliath. This is an absolute David and Goliath. Yep. Absolute.
Can I just add? Can I add to that just before you finish?
And that's another thing that I apologize here, Jeff, but that's another thing that frustrates me about people in the space, is they treat it as though, oh, this fiat thing's going to die. We don't even have to worry about it. We can just sit back and do nothing. They treat it. They don't understand they're up against Goliath. And so my point there is, in order to transition, because we're up against Goliath, we need Bitcoin, the network, to be not just as good as the dollar network. Yeah. It has to be 10 times better. It has to be 100 times better in order to incentivize the average Joe and Jane to use this system, because they're, at the end of the day, not going to do it from a philosophical standpoint. They're going to do it from a practical standpoint.
Yeah. And what I just wanted to highlight or put an exclamation point on is, Goliath is only empowered by us.
Yeah, right.
It looks like that because we give it our strength. Yeah. And as it has to prey on our energy, because it's based on theft. It's based on centralization. And as we give it more energy, we're powering the very thing taking our energy. And so and every single person, if we live in a world of nodes, each of us, right? Each of us are impacting each other through our actions or the free market, or our ideas move to other people, and those ideas pass on. Everything we've ever created, everything around us is from us. So if we are all giving the system that we know is based on theft more of our energy, who do we have to blame?
Yeah,
right. Of course, but to your point, inside that system, everybody thinks they're making more money than the other person, and it's based on you're literally playing prisoner's dilemma, where everybody's getting worse because they can't imagine what a new system looks like. And that new system, as long as it stays decent, we cannot. To your point on the last podcast, I think this is what I've just really been thinking a lot about, because it's true. Our incentives are inside the existing system, and we don't see how it's sucking our energy, and we're giving it more strength when we could just move our time and energy to the new system, and we would give that strength. So
long
does
as
this happen?
Better.
Right.
As long as
So yeah,
because if it's inferior, then we're taking that same time and energy and allocating it to dealing with an inferior system.
Yeah, or you could say this, or you could say this. That's why venture capital. That's why the free market works so effectively. Why are our returns going to be so incredible? Because we realized where this would go with the right capital inside this to make it superior.
Right.
Right. So we saw a future that didn't look like this future, and we said, okay, just like the internet in 96 or 95, if we create 10 times, 100 times better, and the return of capital or the value in these businesses is created because they're delivering so much value because they created the value.
Yeah, right.
Right. And as one system centralizes more and it gets worse, this actually becomes easier to do. And so because you're right, some of the areas in Bitcoin and everything else, it didn't work as a payment mechanism 5 years ago, 4 years, 3 years, just emerging now. And some of the other things that are needed to be able to accelerate this, to make it easier, to make it 100 times easier. I'll give you an example. In Breeze, one of our companies we funded, and they've created an SDK, which is software that you can just plug in Lightning into your business, or into any business, web business to knowledge business, and you can plug it in and work on all of their back end and all of the transactions. I'm not going to say they work 100% of the time yet, but they will, or they're very close to that. So they're improving that, what I said, a lot. But you can now hold, apart from that, you can personally hold Bitcoin, your own keys in their network, and get a share of all the fees, because there's so many transactions moving back and forth through this, and you get, so you actually, it's not yield on your Bitcoin like Saylor would say, it's fees from, but that's the true risk-free rate of the new economy, because those fees, you hold your keys. It's completely self-custodial. It's not centralized. So nobody can take it from you, and you get a portion of the fees. But more than that, they share the fees with their vendors. So now a vendor has 2.5-3% Visa charges, or all the banking charges, and in some areas, it's way higher than that. And in this new network, they get paid. They get paid for taking money rather than get extracted from. And so the market will, you can see in how fast they're growing, how many people are signing up for this, and it creates this value, that because the value is so much greater than the extractive system, they can pass that value on to their customers through the same thing. So I'm just using examples of ideas that this new system and things that we're seeing in this new system emerging and growing really fast as a result of having different rails.
Yeah, and that's exciting. And Bitcoin does have such a huge advantage over the current system, although it's Goliath, from a standpoint of, just like David, it's far more nimble. Yeah. And that you can take it across border, 250,000 in your back pocket, and you can try doing that with gold, or try doing that with silver or something like that. So, I mean, my hat's off to you and Lynn and everyone that is in the space trying to create the future that's going to benefit society at large. And, I appreciate you coming on, Jeff. I appreciate you texting me. And is there any place that we can tell the viewers to go to check out what you're doing with all these businesses that you're investing in? Because it's really, I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's so if you're either looking for capital in Bitcoin or Bitcoin company, or looking to learn more about this, Ego Death Capital, or Jeff Booth at Ego Death Capital. You could find me there. But right back at you, George. I think I really appreciate the kind of the type of debates you and I have had over the time, because I think it helps a whole bunch of other people understand the nuance of kind of what's at stake. And what's at stake? What's at stake is actually you have a centralizing force that that is completely against the free market, and that's a terrible. That would be a terrible way to live.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not an easy battle.
Yeah,
this is going to be the challenge of a lifetime. I mean, this is basically the 300 Spartans
totally
against Persia, and
Yep.
we have to realize that, or we have zero chance of winning.
Yep, totally.
All right, buddy. As always.
Yeah, that was awesome,
man. I look forward to speaking to you. I think we're probably going to see each other down here in Medellin soon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
All right, guys, on that bombshell, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. As always, make sure that you're standing up for freedom, liberty, free market capitalism, decentralization. We'll see you on the next video.